Hey guys, we are back to go ahead and disassemble this Galaxy S5. I'm pretty excited to have this phone. You can tell that it's definitely been beat up. It's completely shattered screen to the point where it's actually pulling away from the AMOLED that's underneath. So it'll be pretty difficult to take apart. Use a couple different pry tools, a few different spudgers that I have. Probably a metal pry tool to get some of the tape off, a dental pick, maybe some of the cables underneath. Another flat spudger pry tool as well. We have a Phillips head screwdriver. There'll be a few Phillips head screws in here. I think it's about 12 total that we'll have to take apart. And a couple of plastic pry tools we'll try first and see if we can't gain some leverage with this as well. We also will need a heat gun to help us go ahead and remove this LCD. This phone's much different than other Samsung devices that you've had. To actually remove the back cover, you'll have to remove the LCD, much like you'd see on an iPhone 5 or 5S. If it was in better shape, we would use a suction cup to help us pull it off a little bit and gain some leverage. But with this particular phone, being the shattered, there will be no suction available with the suction cup. So go ahead and start heating the phone up and start removing the LCD. Now I'm not worried about overheating this. If I was using this on an actual working LCD, I'd use an infrared heat or temperature gun to help us make sure we don't go too hot. I wouldn't want to damage my LCD. So if you're just changing your charging port, or if you're just trying to prepare your home button, your mic, or anything like that, then I definitely use an infrared thermometer. Make sure we don't get above roughly 180 degrees. Really the goal is here to just loosen the adhesive to go ahead and pull this phone off of the frame. Now, it does have adhesive across the back of the AMOLED. This is the first time I've ever attempted to open this phone. This is the first one I've ever done. So it may take me some time to actually get it open, as I've had no experience here. We're just going to start prying away down the side. There's a thin layer of adhesive that runs down the sides of the phone and then thicker towards the top. Now, you want to start down the sides and then move up to the top and then down the other side. And then be very careful as you go across the bottom, as you'll see the home button and your menu and back buttons are there as well. So you can see that there's some of the black adhesive that I'm pulling out. See how shattered this phone is. It's just coming off in pieces. Just going to pry up here around the top, being somewhat careful of the camera. Just going to pry this longer piece off here. And be careful of our speaker grill. Like I was saying, I'm not worried about damaging this LCD at all. So if this was not shattered or damaged, I would take a lot more care using some tar picks just to pry it up, heating it up, prying it up from all corners, and then kind of working it off nice and slow. So it's working our way around, getting as much of the glass off as possible. Working down the other side of the phone now. See if we can't get some leverage in here. Then work our way down, sliding our tool down. Now normally if this was heated up as well, you'd want to make sure that it stays nice and hot. And the reason behind that is the AMOLED does have basically some adhesive that's holding it to the frame, much like you'd see in other Galaxy devices as well. So you would want to be very careful as if your screen is intact, you're trying not to damage it. Be very careful down here towards the home and back and menu button. I know that this phone has probably got some damage down there as well. There was some missing glass. So sliding my pry tool, but now I wouldn't normally do this unless if the phone was dead, but I want to show you exactly where the cable is that attaches on the back. You'll have to go ahead and disassemble that, or take that, unplug that from the port behind before you start to remove the LCD. There's actually another cable that runs down the back of the phone for the home button, the fingerprint scanner as well. So just kind of pulling it back in a way. You can see that the LED is actually pulling away from the glass. And I'm just trying to get my pry tool underneath to undo the adhesive. We'll start down here at the bottom, see if we can get some of this adhesive to pull up. Just trying to get the adhesive to come off. Let me go ahead and pull it back a little bit more, see if we can get some separation for the cable that's underneath. You can see that there's the back of the AMOLED, and if we flip it over on this side, you can see right here there's a cable that's attached on the interior. Just kind of pulling back on it, we'll go ahead and release that ribbon cable for us. And there's some adhesive holding the AMOLED on, and I'll show you exactly where it attaches once I get the LED out of the phone. Right now I'm just releasing all the adhesive that's holding the screen down and pulling it forward. See, all these copper strips down the side here on the back of the phone hold this together. I'm just putting my pry tool in and getting the adhesive off just a little bit further. Now lifting it forward, like you would do if you're removing the LCD, you can see there's a cable that's holding down right here that goes through the body of the phone. So you see those three copper sections in there, those are all adhesing the back of the LED onto the phone. So we're going to go ahead and slide our tool in and pry the home button away from the glass. Now it's a little bit different than what you'd seen a lot because of all the stuff that goes in for this fingerprint scanner here as well. So you'll see it's a much larger button than you've seen in other phones. We're going to add some more heat here to help the adhesive come off of the home and the menu and the back button, as well as the home button as well. That should be good. I'm going to use a guitar pick here to gain a little bit more access down here at the bottom. Now it would honestly be a lot easier if this screen was in one piece to remove these buttons down here at the bottom. You can see that the home button is pulling away from the rest of the glass on the front. I'm just going to try to get underneath it and see if we can't pry it away separate from the rest of the phone. The menu button and the back button are all parts of the charging port that's on the back side of this mid body of the phone. See, this is what I'm talking about. These copper pads right here are sticky. This is what is adhesing the LCD or the display to the actual phone itself. clear my work area here. There's a lot of broken glass here. See how big that home button is and the sensors on it. We start to pry some of this glass away, and I'll show you exactly what it looks like. It's got a little white housing frame around the button. The actual home button itself has a cable that kind of wraps around it, much like you'd see on like an iPhone 4 or 5, where it's kind of one piece. Let's go ahead and set that aside for a second and try to remove some of this additional glass here. It's pulling up on the adhesive that's across the bottom of the phone. There we go. There's one of the buttons here you can see. And it looks like the button here, this menu button, actually has a torn ribbon cable on it as well. But we'll disassemble the entire phone and I'll show you what that looks like. Just pulling as much of the glass off of this as possible before I start to try to take the mid frame of the phone out of the bezel housing. Alright, one thing that I should have done at the start, I was just too excited to get started on this phone, is actually remove the battery off of it. We'll go ahead and pull the battery out. A little bit different than what you've seen on a lot of other devices. It's a longer and thinner. Alright, now the goal is to kind of get as much of this cleaned up as possible. We'll need to pull the mid-frame out of this housing. And to do so, we're going to kind of basically bend the bezel a little bit just to get the clips to unsnap. Get as much of this glass off here as possible. See, we have 10 screws on the interior. All these black screws must be undone to go ahead and release the mid-frame of the phone from the rear housing of the phone. Now these are all the same size, so there's no reason to really determine exactly where they came out on the phone. You can just set them aside as they are all one size, so one size fits all here. So you got a screw stuck. We're just going to try to use some tweezers to pull it out. And set it aside. Just a few more to go. All right. Next thing we're going to need to do is try to remove the mid-frame of the phone out. We'll try to remove these home buttons. I'm not sure exactly how they're attached to the mid-frame at this point, but they do just wrap around to the charging port that's actually stuck to the mid-frame, so you don't need to remove these just yet. They have a decent amount of adhesive that's holding them down to the phone itself. So looking to see exactly how this mid-frame clips in, and it's not extremely difficult to pry out. Just using a plastic tool to make sure you don't damage your bezel. You can get a little bit of leverage underneath it. Just kind of bending the sides a little bit will help the midframe come free. Now it does take me a few seconds to realize exactly how this midframe is put in there, but there's actually clips within the battery compartment of this phone that hold the midframe to the housing as well. So there's clips that run down kind of the bezel housing, and then there's clips on the back. There's also 3 screws that hold this housing in. So before you start prying on it too much, you're going to want to remove these 3 screws from the rear of the phone as well. There are 3 silver screws. Check and see if there's any clips around here. There's 2 screws here that screw through the charging port of the phone. And then one that's a little bit further just above the loudspeaker. And sometimes these screws can be a little pesky in this plastic housing. See if we can just get it out of here. This thing's being really tricky. There we go. We have one more screw to take out. Alright, now that we've moved those 3 screws, you can see that our bezel should come out a little bit easier. Still a little bit tricky. There is still the connectors within the battery area of the phone that you need to disconnect to go ahead and remove the midframe from the housing. I find it's easy if you get kind of started on the back of the midframe here. You can get it released a little bit, pull it back, kind of get these clips undone. You can come back here and you can see there's clips that run down the side of the battery housing. There's 3 here that run down the side. Just pulling them forward as you have the housing started to release on the sides. I'll go ahead and unclip for you. Go ahead and just pull those free. There's also 2 more that are right here within the connection for the battery. Go ahead and pull those free. Now you can see we have a little bit more separation from the midframe of the phone from the bezel. It's still a little bit tricky to get out. You're going to want to run a tool down the sides of it. You can kind of push on the SIM slot of the phone to see if that'll help you. Now it could be the reason why this is so hard to remove is it is slightly bent. The midframe is, which is why I'm disassembling the phone completely instead of just changing the screen. Just checking these connectors to make sure that they are fully done. We're going to put our pry tool right here at the top. We'll get a connector out. And right here as well, that'll go ahead and pull most of the midframe free. Still a little bit tricky. We're going to wiggle it back and forth and see if we can't get it to come out here at the bottom. Now I'd be very careful about prying down here by the charging port or the buttons. If you're going to do so, make sure you're not prying directly onto the cable that runs around and then back down to the midframe of the phone. Try to wiggle it a little bit more here, see if we can't get some separation. Just checking to make sure there's no additional screws or latches on the interior that's holding it in there. Now I wouldn't try to force it, I would just kind of rock it back and forth until you can get the separation that you're looking for. Just making sure that all of the little connectors that hold the midframe onto the rear housing are disconnected. And it should just come out of the grooves that are into the phone here. This one's just being a little bit tricky. just does not want to come out. See if we can find it. If there's a clip right here on this side as well. Try to wiggle it a little bit more. There we go. Now it comes free for us. Alright, so we have our rear housing here. And then we have the mid frame of the phone. You can see that we have, much like you'd see on the interior after you remove the rear housing on an S4. But you can see that it's kind of a hybrid between, if you've ever taken a Note apart, a Note 2 and an S3, it's a little bit of the same kind of manner where the housing kind of snaps around the mid-frame. Only this mid-frame is not as big as the Note, and the adhesion of the glass actually takes apart onto the bezel and not actually onto the mid-frame of the phone. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and disassemble the mid-frame of the phone. There are two screws that are holding the two boards down. We have one screw right here, right below the camera. We'll go ahead and just remove this screw. And we have a couple connectors. This connector right here is what attaches to the home button on the front. Once you free that, you can go ahead and remove it. We also have a little wire antenna connector here that connects down to the bottom charging port. Once you've undone both of those, you can kind of wiggle the board, and there's a connector on the back of it that connects the logic board down to the charging port. You can just undo that ribbon cable, and the logic port will come free. There's our front-facing camera and our rear camera. Both have just little ribbon cables that hook them to the board. You can go ahead and unclip those if you need to change those as well. Now down here at the bottom we have an additional screw that holds the charging port in place. We'll go ahead and undo this screw. You can pull up on the ribbon cable here. There's a little bit of adhesive that's holding this board down. And before we go too much further, we're going to want to go ahead and remove the button here. Now, if it's really hard to get off, now on this particular one it's already ripped, and you can't replace just the buttons. You have to replace the whole charging port to replace these home and back buttons, which is kind of a pain on the new phone. But if you're trying to remove this and it's not damaged, you can go ahead and heat this button up with a heat gun, and it will come a little bit easier or pliable to remove. I'd use a nice flat scraping tool to remove it. I wouldn't use anything sharp or pointy. In my case, it doesn't necessarily matter because the cable itself, this charging port's already damaged. We'll use a flat spudger to try to remove it. Put our spudger underneath and try to pull forward.
In graduation, it's just the beginning, because we build education around where you want to go, so, you can get the job you want. Ready? Let's get to work.
I wasn't using a ton of force to get this off. I was basically trying to just wedge it, hold the adhesive up, and then you can go ahead and pull it free. So we still have our buttons that are stuck here. I'm going to go ahead and remove these completely, as I'll try to use this mid-frame again in the reassembly of this phone. Perfect. The button comes off completely.
We got this amazing 10-piece meal from KFC, and it came with a free chocolate chip cake.
Get those white pads off that diffuse the light as it comes through.
Yeah, we'll try not to take offense to that.
Alright. Next thing we're going to go ahead and do is remove the vibration module out of the phone. Go ahead and pull that free.
Welcome to the family, Dad.
I've been hearing good things about Sprint's Blue Network. Oh, it's unbelievable. Fewer drop calls, better call quality. It's fast, right?
A little bit of adhesive. There's a that holds the logic board down to the pin. I'll start at the pin side of it first and try to pry it up a little bit.
Okay, I don't know where to go with that.
And just be very gentle as we work this free.
Fewer drop calls and better call quality. And for a limited time, get a switching bonus worth up to $650. Happy connecting from Sprint.
The Wright brothers started in a garage. Mattel started in a garage. Disney started in a garage.
I'm just going to use a duller dental pick here. I don't want to rip through the cable. Once you gain some leverage, you can use your fingers to slowly pull it free. We have another cable connector here we're going to go ahead and remove.
The gods are coming. I know.
And you get a little bit of leverage just down here in the corner of it. There's a little bit of adhesive that holds this down. You can go ahead and pull that just gently as you go. I'm not using excessive force. I don't want to damage the cable at all. Let's pull it up nice and slow. Alright, now our mid-frame is clean. We'll go ahead and work on the back housing of the phone and see what can be removed from it as well. They've gone a little bit different way with the back housing of the phone.
R2D2 vending machine. Alright, this is the drawer you're looking for.
It's basically like an all-contained unit. The volume button, the power button are all kind of contained within the back of the phone. We're going to remove our headphone jack here. It's just a little bit of adhesive that holds the connectors down into the logic board here. Pry that up nice and slowly. That comes free, very easy. We'll go ahead and try to take out the rear speaker here as well. I thought this would be a little bit easier, but there's a lot of adhesive that is holding this speaker down.
What do we got here? You got
Try to be nice and gentle as we pull it out. Now, one thing that I want to point out on this phone that's very different from the other devices is the home button, the back button, the charging port, the menu button are all one contained unit. So to replace that, you'd have to replace just that one full board, which is kind of nice that you don't have so many different parts to do. But in my case, since this one is actually broken, the menu button's broken, I will actually have to replace the whole board. I think the board was about $25 off of eBay within the U.S. If you're ordering it from China, it's probably about $10 less. It's pulling from both sides of this speaker. See if we can't gain some leverage. There's a little bit of adhesive that's kind of holding it down here. Just some 3M double-sided adhesive. You can go ahead and pull that off. So it kind of rip away there. Now, I haven't found a way to get the earpiece speaker out, the power button, or the volume buttons out. If I do, I'll post a video on that. I definitely don't want to take it too far apart as I want to use this in my reassembly. This is my S5 disassembly video. If you found it helpful, go ahead and hit the like button. If you have any questions, go ahead and hit me up in the comments. As always, thanks for watching the video, you guys, and I'll see you on the next one. When I get the assembly done, I will go ahead and post that, and you can hit that link at the bottom right to view that once it's uploaded. Thanks for watching again, you guys. See you next time.